Welcome into the Atlanta Showdown, a little kickoff special between Florida State and Alabama. To my left, Kyle Henderson of BamaInsider.com. To my right, Ira Schoffel, Warchant.com. I'm Jeff Cameron of 97.9 ESPN Radio. Let's look at the Alabama passing attack versus the Florida State pass defense. And I'll start with you, Kyle. First of all, Hurts last year throws for 2,780 yards, completed nearly 63% of his passes, 23 touchdowns to 9 interceptions. But that's an area I think a lot of people suspect he has to get better at, throwing the football. He's got threats like Calvin Ridley and Robert Foster and Cameron Sims, a lot of talent there. So let's talk about how much better will Alabama's passing attack be this year.
Well, it's quite interesting being around the Alabama realm because even though Jalen Hurts was 13-1 as a starter, he still gets some criticism, and it's quite interesting because I felt he was productive, and he's a type of player that does come up in big-time situations. As example, you have during Clemson, he reeled off that late touchdown run, and he's a player that has so much moxie, and I think we saw what we're going to see during the 2017 season in the spring game. I mean, he threw for over 300 yards, led Alabama's Crimson team to a victory there at the end, and he's very mature for a sophomore. And I just think that the team bodes really well around him, and I think he's going to have an excellent season. So I think the Alabama passing game obviously starts with Jalen, and I think he's going to be quite a surprise in 2017.
Obviously, everybody knows what Jalen Hurts can do as a runner, and most teams don't want him to hurt him in that way, so they try to contain him, keep him in the pocket. He has to make those big throws down the field when he gets one-on-one coverage. Do they feel like he's progressing in that realm and he's going to make those passes this year?
Yeah, I certainly think so. I mean, during the spring game, for example, he was 16 to 25 for 301 yards passing with 2 touchdowns, and his vertical game was great. I mean, he hooked up with Robert Foster a couple times, and he has the weapons. For example, you mentioned Calvin Ridley, a player who's been very productive over the last couple years. Some guy, he can stretch the field, and then you have true freshman in Jerry Jeudy, who's a 5-star, and I think what he did for the spring game is going to be an example of what he can do during the 2017 season as well. So Jalen Hurts, people are going to be they're going to be suspect of him and what he can do, but I think overall he showed a great versatility this spring, and it's been really interesting to see him work with Brian Daboll, the new offensive coordinator. But I think Alabama fans certainly have faith in him, and I think it's going to be exciting.
Well, it's a natural progression. He's just a sophomore, and he's going to be going against Ira, arguably one of the great, if not the best, secondaries in college football. This is an area, if you're a Florida State fan, that you watch and you say, okay, I feel pretty good about the secondary. Talk about that group.
Yeah, they definitely should be in the conversation for the best secondary in college football, if not the best. You talk about the experience they have and then the talent they have. I mean, Derwin James, how many teams are going to have 3 defensive backs like Derwin James, Tavares McFadden, who led the country in interceptions, and also Trey Marshall? He'll miss the first half of this game, which is a big loss for Florida State because of the targeting penalty from the bowl game. But he'll play in the second half, but they have so many, and the other thing is they have so many guys. It's not just a secondary that's based on 1 or 2 guys, like maybe early last year with Derwin James kind of was the focal point of the secondary. They have so many guys. You talk about Nate Andrews coming back for another year. He started 1 million games, played in 1 million games at Florida State. A.J. Westbrook at safety, Calvin Bruton at safety. Carlos Becker, who played some safety last year, is going to be playing corner. Kyle Myers at corner, Levante Taylor, Stanford Samuels. I mean, the list goes on and on. These are guys that most of these guys have played a ton of college football. It's just it's a wealth of experience. This secondary will be tested by Alabama. I agree that Jalen Hurts is a quality quarterback. I think he's better than some of their fans feel sometimes. And Calvin Ridley's a big time weapon. But this secondary, if they don't play extraordinarily well this season, I think it's a bad sign for the coaching staff because they have tons of talent and experience.
Yeah, elite talent there. This is really for both of you. Either one of you can chime in on this because I think what's a key matchup? I mean, we're talking about when you look at a matchup like this, Alabama's passing attack versus Florida State's defense, we're talking about a real strength for Florida State. What's a key matchup for them there?
To me, it's not a player. I mean, Calvin Ridley's a big-time player, obviously, but to me, it's not a player. It's eye discipline. It's just discipline overall for that secondary. When FSU gets into trouble, certainly last year against Lamar Jackson and some of the other teams they struggled with, they just got out of their assignments. They fell for misdirection. They fell for trickery, those types of things. In Alabama, with all this time and a new offensive coordinator, I think they're really going to try to bait those defensive backs into some mistakes, hit them with some big plays of play action. I also think Alabama's going to go back to establishing that running game. I thought they got away from it a little bit against Clemson in the national championship game. I think they'll try to enforce their will in the running game and then set FSU up for some big passes. FSU has to be disciplined and show that eye discipline Jimbo always talks about.
Well, when they got away with that, got away from that, that's when Bo went down, and I think they kind of lost track of that and went a different direction. But they killed teams, and I imagine they'll try to do it against Florida State because Jalen Hurts is so good at it with the RPOs, with the run-pass options, and that's how Florida State's defense loses its discipline.
Well, and I think to build off what Ira said, I think the play action is going to be very big in a game like this because I think you're going to be crowding the box from a Florida State perspective, and you're going to look at those one-on-one matchups on the outside. And Alabama has the receivers that can certainly stretch the field and make plays, and it's going to come down to who can make plays. And a guy like Jerry Jeudy could arise, or a guy like Calvin Ridley, Robert Foster, and it's going to also be interesting to see what Alabama can do inside the red zone with some of their tight ends. They did lose O.J. Howard, but they have some guys who are emerging. Hell Hentage is one particular player, and Miller Forrestall, but those guys are somewhat unproven in the red zone especially. So key matchups on the outside, Alabama has plenty of weapons, but Florida State certainly loaded.
The one thing I would say about that is Nick Saban's going to know that Derwin James and Tavares McFadden are going to be trying to make a name for themselves in this game. I mean, they already have names.
You try to go to them.
But this is a chance for them to, on that stage, to make, just cement their status for the next level and in college football. And I think, again, those guys have to be very careful to not try to make too big a play.
Do we think which team has the matchup here? Who wins this matchup, I guess you would say, with Florida State's pass defense against Alabama's pass offense?
Well, I think going into it, I think Florida State certainly has the edge on paper, and a lot of these Alabama wide receivers, though they are very talented, I think most of them are still unproven. We need to see Robert Foster impress in-game situation, and though he did have his big spring game, we need to see it come a big game like this. You have Calvin Ridley, who I think is a showstopper, but Florida State certainly, in my opinion, at least right now on paper, has the edge.
You think Florida State's defense has the edge here?
They definitely have the edge. If they don't win that battle, I think it's a bad sign for Charles Kelly and that coaching staff. Again, it would mean that they were outcoached. I think Florida State has the talent, the experience. They should win that matchup. If they don't, again, I think it's a bad sign.
Next time we do another preview, and we hope you join us both on BamaInsider.com and Warchant.com. We'll be looking at Alabama's offensive line versus Florida State's defensive line, another great matchup between these two juggernauts.